Let me tell you a story. There was a little boy who was excited because his family was finally going to the beach. He had been waiting for this chance for months when it was being planned, and the day had finally come. So he gets loaded up in the car with his brothers and sisters. Oh, there were teenage children there. There were babies. So they get to the beach after driving an hour and a half, and they get out. They walk along the sand until they find this area that's just secluded and a good place to stop and rest. So some of the older ones, they start getting out an area, setting up an area to lay down in the sun. Some brought books. The younger ones, who seemed to always have energy, started playing in the water, started running up and down the sand, the shoreline, looking at what needed to be looked at, and just having the time of their life. Well, that little boy, see, he wasn't familiar with the ocean, nor were his parents, for that matter. And as the evening wore on, the tide started to rise. Slowly at first, but seeming to get faster by the minute. And you see, the area that this family had stayed at, in order to get there, you had to walk around this wall that went near this natural rock formation that nearly went to the waterline. But it was perfectly fine to pass when the tide was low. But now that the tide has risen, that water was crashing up against that wall pretty hard. And if you are not familiar with the California coastline, let me tell you what it's like. You have a sandy beach that may be 50, 75 feet from the water. You have this mud wall that can go anywhere from 30 to 50 feet up in the air, that is next to impossible to climb up. And so when you're on the beach, you have a wall to your back, and the only way you can get off the beach is if there is a trail, a path, or you walk far enough to find a place where that wall is not there. Well, this family had found a place that was against the wall, but in order to get back to the path, they had to walk around that rock formation that went out close to the water. And so that little boy's dad had some thinking to do. Is he going to try to lead his family to time the wave and make a dash for it? There were more children than there were arms between the parents. Well, he figured, well, maybe the safe thing to do be just to run for it himself. Well, not himself, because he took his son with him. The only other option would be to walk in the opposite direction along the coastline and maybe find a path, but who knows how long you'd be walking. And it was getting dark. It wasn't dark yet, but it was getting close. Well, he decides he's going to make a run for it. So he grabs his son, holds him in his arms, and he walks down to where that rock formation is, and he times the wave. And he's watching, he's timing, and then he decides to make a run for it. Well, he didn't but make it halfway there when the first wave came up. And when that wave came in, it went up all the way to his waist. And just the force of that water sloshing around, trying to pull him into the water. But there just so happened to be a branch, a root sticking out of that rock that was in the right place at that time. And as the water was rushing back into the ocean, that dad grabbed that root, and that kept him solid. So that wave went back in, and he's got to keep going. He's already committed. So he tries to make the second half of the journey. And now his clothes are wet, his boots are full of water. He doesn't get but 3/4 of the way when the next wave comes in. But this time the water is not as strong. It only came up to his knees this time. He was able to position himself, to anchor himself and hang on to his son. And when the water went back into the ocean, he made that last trek, and he made it on dry sand. And when he got safely on that dry sand, and he just fell on his knees and tried to catch his breath. Just imagine the adrenaline running through him. He puts his son down. And when my father put me down safely on that shore, I told him, "You did it, Dad. You made it." You see, I was that boy. That's a story that kind of sticks with you. God put that root at that spot for that reason. And when I say God, I mean specifically Jehovah, Yeshua. Well, he finally gets up to the ledge, and with the help of some other people there who were familiar with that area, they were able to guide the rest of my family along another path that we had not seen. And we were all safe. We got back in the car. Some of us were shivering. not just from cold. So many things. That's the kind of story that makes you think what's really important. That's my story. And you have one too. We all have stories. Our stories are what makes us unique. Our stories are what contributed to our character, to who we are. It's the one of the few things that really separates us. You have a story. You may be thinking about it now. You may think it's nothing, it's just something that happened. But you know what? It's your story. And you have a voice. So share your story. You never know, but someone may come across that story that really speaks to them. That's my story.